My name is Leona. The smell of freshly cut grass always transported me back to those carefree summers of childhood. I vividly remember one specific day, the sun painting the sky a vibrant blue as I desperately tried to reach the high branch of the apple tree in our backyard. My fingers slipped on the rough bark, and frustration began to tighten my chest. Suddenly, a larger, stronger hand grasped mine, propelling me upwards. It was Daniel, my brother. 4 years older, he always seemed to have the solution for all my little childhood dramas. From the top of the branch, we shared a tart apple, laughing at the feeling of freedom and the small adventure we had shared. These were the memories that warmed my heart, the proof of a fraternal bond that I believed to be unbreakable. Even with this bond, it was undeniable that Daniel had always been the center of attention. Not that my parents didn't love me, far from it. But there was a special aura around him, perhaps because he was the firstborn, perhaps because he had a natural charm that captivated everyone. He received more allowances. His mistakes were minimized with an indulgent smile. I watched in silence, without resentment, simply as a fact of family life. When Daniel started dating Lydia, the rhythm of the house changed. In a short time, the wedding and the news of the pregnancy completely transformed the family dynamic. Their decision to move back in with us seemed natural at the time, a way for my parents to offer support in the first months with the baby. I was still there in my corner, working at the city library, each salary carefully saved with the dream of a future university scholarship. The house, once a haven of tranquility, began to fill with a constant noise, new routines, and a subtle tension that I couldn't fully decipher. Lydia, with Oliver's arrival, seemed enveloped in an aura of constant irritability. My small slips, like forgetting a dishcloth out of place or not noticing dirty laundry in the basket, turned into sharp reprimands. At first, I tried to appease her, imagining that hormonal changes and the exhaustion of motherhood made her more sensitive. But the criticisms became frequent, direct, and invariably in front of my parents and Daniel. An awkward silence would settle, and I would feel glances from the corner of my eyes, but no word of defense was uttered on my behalf. The explanation was always the same. Lydia was going through a delicate time, and I, apparently, should just absorb it in silence. In my rare moments of free time, I tried to get closer to Oliver. Holding him in my arms, feeling the soft warmth of his little body, awakened an instant affection in me. But Lydia invariably appeared, taking him from me with a grunt about my inexperience or the improper way I was holding him. My attempts to help were always met with suspicion and sharp words. Little by little, I withdrew, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The home that once welcomed me now seemed to repel me, and the figure of my brother, once a safe harbor, became increasingly distant, enveloped in the new family dynamic that excluded him from my orbit. That fateful day began like so many others. I woke up to the distant singing of a bird and the hope that the exhausting routine at the library would distract me from the heavy atmosphere that hung over the house. Lydia's words echoed in my mind, each criticism, each disapproving look undermining my confidence. I tried hard to be helpful, not to be a burden, but it seemed that every attempt was met with more hostility. In the library, among the unmistakable smell of old paper and the reverent silence of the readers, I found a temporary refuge. I immersed myself in books, letting other stories transport me far from my reality. But even there, the shadow of worry followed me. With each message on my cell phone, I feared it would be another complaint, another veiled accusation. Upon returning home that night, the physical exhaustion added to the emotional weight I carried. The living room door was ajar, and raised voices reached me. I hesitated for a moment, intuition telling me not to enter, but curiosity and a glimmer of hope that perhaps the tension had dissipated propelled me inside. The scene that unfolded before me was surreal. 2 suitcases were in the middle of the room, open, revealing my clothes folded hastily. Lydia stood with her arms crossed, a cold and determined expression on her face. My parents were in the kitchen, silent, with evasive glances. Daniel was nowhere in sight. Lydia's words cut through the air like razors. "You're not being helpful here at all, Leona. You just take up space and cause problems. You can leave and find somewhere else to stay." A shock ran through my body, paralyzing me for a moment. It was as if the ground had opened up beneath my feet. I looked at my parents, searching for some sign of support, a word of defense. But their faces remained impassive, their eyes avoiding mine. Daniel's absence was deafening. Where was my brother, the companion of mischief in the apple tree, the confidant of my secrets? His silence was a silent betrayal, more painful than Lydia's cruel words. The realization dawned slowly. I was being expelled. From my own home. By my sister-in-law. And no one was objecting. Sadness hit me like an overwhelming wave, mixed with bitter disbelief. How could they allow this? How could Daniel remain silent? That home I had always known, the safe nest of my childhood, was falling apart before my eyes, and I was the weak link, the intruder to be discarded. I swallowed the lump in my throat, tears burning my eyes, but I refused to shed them there. I didn't want to give Lydia the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. I picked up my suitcases, feeling the weight of injustice and loneliness crushing my shoulders. Before walking out the door, I took a deep breath and said, my voice trembling, I'm leaving because I don't want to cause any more problems and, mainly, I don't want Oliver to grow up in an environment of arguments. It was a half-truth. The other half was the piercing pain of knowing that I was no longer welcome, that my place was no longer there. The street greeted me with the cold night breeze. Each step moved me away from the house, but also propelled me towards an uncertain future. At that moment, the only certainty I had was that I needed to survive. And that need transformed into a force, a silent engine that began to drive my overcoming. The door closed behind me with a cold click, a sound that echoed not only in the stillness of the night but also within my chest. In that instant, I felt desolate. I missed not just a home, but a part of my identity, the security of the family ties that I had always believed to be unbreakable. The night breeze carried with it a familiar scent of jasmine from my mother's garden, a cruel irony that accentuated the feeling of loss. I looked at the house, the lit windows like indifferent eyes, and a wave of disbelief mixed with a piercing pain washed over me. How could I have been so wrong about my own family? The asphalt under my feet felt uncertain, each step taking me further from the past and launching me into a nebulous future. Where to go? Who to turn to? The urgency of finding shelter for the night mixed with confusion and hurt. It was then that I remembered Aunt Linda. She had always been the different sheep of the family, with a free spirit and a generous heart. Despite living in a distant neighborhood, her house was the only place that came to mind as a possible refuge. The long walk to Aunt Linda's house felt like an eternity. Each passing car's headlights, each group of people laughing on the street, contrasted with my growing loneliness. My shoulders ached with the weight of the suitcases, but it was the weight of rejection that truly bent me over. The tears, which I had held back with such difficulty, finally began to stream down my face, silent and bitter. When I finally arrived at Aunt Linda's house, with its somewhat messy garden and the yellowish light in the window, I felt a thread of hope rekindle. I hesitated before ringing the bell, afraid of disturbing her, but exhaustion and despair won out. Aunt Linda opened the door with a welcoming smile that felt like a balm to my wounded soul. Her attentive eyes quickly noticed the tears and the suitcases. Without asking too many questions at that moment, she hugged me tightly and invited me in. That simple hug carried more comfort than all the words of explanation I could have given. That night, in a small guest room filled with books and curious objects, I shared my story with Aunt Linda. She listened attentively, without judgment, offering only words of support and understanding. She wasn't surprised by Lydia's attitude, who, according to her, had always been a bit harsh. But she was shocked by my parents' omission and, especially, by Daniel's silence. Aunt Linda welcomed me into her home with generosity, insisting that I stay as long as I needed to get back on my feet. But I knew I couldn't abuse her kindness. The urgency of achieving my independence was palpable. I started working extra hours at the library, taking advantage of every free minute to earn a little more money. The physical exhaustion was great, but the feeling of doing something for myself, of building my own path, gave me the strength to continue. In the quiet early mornings after a long day of work, I would open my textbooks. Automotive engineering had always been my passion, a world of machines and gears that fascinated me. and now even more so with the possibility of making projects more sustainable with electric cars. The idea of turning this dream into reality became my focus, my anchor in the midst of the storm. The library, once a refuge, also became my study space. I took advantage of the quieter moments to read and take notes. Little by little, the possibility of getting a scholarship began to emerge as a promising horizon. The dedication and effort paid off. The news of my acceptance into the university was a ray of sunshine in the midst of a long period of darkness. It was the first brick in the construction of my new future. The years that followed were filled with hard work and intense study. Balancing college with work at the library and a coffee shop to supplement my income required sacrifices, but with each achievement, each obstacle overcome, my confidence grew stronger. The pain of family rejection was still there, a deep scar, but the determination to move forward and realize my dreams was stronger. And then the world opened up. My passion for cars and my engineering background led me to work in large companies around the world. Each project, each challenge accepted, was a personal victory, proof that I was capable of building my own success, regardless of the circumstances. The internet became a new platform to share my enthusiasm for automotive engineering. I loved my work and loved even more talking and sharing about it. All of this made me very excited. With accessible language and a touch of humor, I started creating content that demystified the world of engines and automotive technology. To my surprise, my social media grew rapidly, connecting me with people from all corners of the planet who shared the same passion. The Leona from the library was transforming into a reference in the universe of engineering, without me ever imagining that destiny held an unexpected reunion with my past. 10 years had passed since the night I left my parents' house. 10 years of rebuilding, of focusing on my dreams, and of building a life that, although lonely at times, was genuinely mine. My work took me to incredible places, to meet fascinating people, and to carry out projects that once seemed unattainable. The Leona who left the library for the world was now a recognized professional with an active voice on social media, where I shared my passion in a way that connected theory and fun. The lecture at the municipal school in my hometown came as an unexpected invitation. Initially, I hesitated. The idea of returning to the place that held so many painful memories caused me a certain discomfort. However, the opportunity to inspire young people, to show that passion and perseverance can open doors, spoke louder. Besides, a small voice within me, perhaps a hint of curiosity or even an unconscious need to confront my past, compelled me to accept. On the day of the lecture, the atmosphere in the school's small auditorium was vibrant. Eager children with curious eyes filled the front rows. As I prepared backstage, I felt a pang of nervousness, the same I felt before presenting a major project. But there was something different there, a strange feeling I couldn't decipher. When I was announced and walked onto the stage, my eyes scanned the audience. And then I saw them. My parents, sitting side by side, with deeper wrinkles marking their faces. And next to them, Daniel, with a hesitant expression. In the front row, a bright-eyed boy stared at me with genuine admiration, holding a small toy car. It was at that moment that it clicked. That was Oliver, my nephew. 10 years had passed, and the baby I was barely allowed to hold was now a boy full of life and curiosity. The lecture unfolded in a mixture of emotion and professionalism. I spoke about the beauty of engineering, about the thrill of bringing machines to life, and I noticed the sparkle in Oliver's eyes with every word. At the end, during the question and answer session, he was the one who timidly raised his hand. "Aunt Leona," he said with a sweet and slightly insecure voice, "I love cars. Can I work with you someday?" That "Aunt Leona" hit me like a lightning bolt. It was the first time I had heard that word directed at me. A lump formed in my throat, and I needed a few seconds to regain my voice. "Absolutely, Oliver," I replied, with a smile that came from the bottom of my heart. "If you continue to be this curious and studious, the world of engineering will be wide open for you." After the lecture, my parents and Daniel approached, visibly nervous. Words hesitated on their lips. I saw the regret in their eyes, the shame for what had happened. They wanted to talk, to explain, maybe to apologize. But the silence they had maintained for so long now seemed to create an insurmountable barrier. I listened to them in silence, absorbing each pleading look, each attempt to start a conversation. The pain was still there, latent, but there was also a sense of detachment, as if they were figures from a distant past. Then, Lydia approached. Her gaze showed no remorse, only a hint of sarcasm. With a mocking tone that was so familiar, she said, "Well, you finally became someone decent." At that moment, something inside me ignited. The girl who had been expelled without the right to defend herself no longer existed. The woman who had built her own path, facing challenges and conquering her space, knew her worth. With surprising calmness, I replied, looking her in the eyes, "I was always someone, Lydia. It's a shame you weren't human enough to understand and respect me, even when I wasn't yet world-renowned." The words hung in the air, laden with a truth that echoed in the surrounding silence. I felt the gaze of my parents and Daniel on me, a mixture of surprise and perhaps even a glimmer of understanding. Oliver, confused, looked from one to the other, not understanding the tension that permeated the environment. That night, upon returning to the hotel, I reflected on the reunion. The wounds of the past still ached, but there was also a new feeling, that of having stood my ground, of having shown the strength I had gained. The path to reconciliation seemed long and uncertain, but perhaps, just perhaps, that lecture had planted a small seed of change. Shortly after the reunion at the school, I received an unexpected message on my social media. It was Daniel. The message was simple but carried a hesitant tone. "Leona, Oliver hasn't stopped talking about you. He really wants to get to know you better, to spend some time with you. Can we talk?" I hesitated for long minutes in front of the cell phone screen. An avalanche of conflicting feelings washed over me. The bitterness of the past was still present, the memory of his omission on that fateful night. But there was also the image of little Oliver, with his curious eyes and the toy car in his hand, calling me aunt. And deep down, a trace of that old fraternal affection, dormant beneath layers of resentment, began to awaken. I decided to reply, not with anger, nor with resentment, but with cautious openness. I agreed to talk to Daniel on the condition that Oliver was present. I needed to see the sparkle in my nephew's eyes again, to feel that genuine connection that had not been tainted by the poison of family misunderstandings. The meeting took place in a city park, a neutral place, without the walls laden with memories of my parents' house. Oliver ran towards me as soon as he saw me, his little arms wrapping around my legs in a tight hug. That spontaneous gesture melted part of the coldness I had built around my heart. We spent the afternoon together. Oliver showed me his toys, told me about his friends at school, and asked countless questions about cars and airplanes, absorbing every word with contagious admiration. Daniel watched from a distance, with a hopeful and somewhat nervous look. Little by little, Daniel and I began to reconnect, timidly at first, then with a little more openness. He told me about the difficulties they had faced after I left, about how the family dynamic had become more tense, and how deeply he regretted not defending me. His words seemed sincere, carrying a weight of guilt that I had never witnessed before. My parents also began to make attempts to contact me, sending messages and making calls. At first, I was resistant. The pain of rejection was still strong, and the memory of their silence was difficult to overcome. However, seeing Oliver's genuine joy in having me around, I began to reconsider. I didn't know if I could forgive them, but I was willing to try. My brother ended up separating from Lydia. They had been disagreeing for some time, so Oliver filed for divorce. Gradually, I started talking to my parents and Daniel again. It was still very painful for me to remember the neglect they had shown me in the past, but I needed to move forward and leave the past behind. Over time, family ties began to mend, driven mainly by Oliver's affection. He became the link that united us, the reason for us to put aside pride and resentment. Visits to my parents' house gradually became more frequent. Sunday lunches started happening again, albeit with an atmosphere of caution and light conversation. I had built an independent and successful life, far from the family dynamic that had hurt me. My work provided me with a purpose and the freedom to explore the world. The question that lingered now was, what role would my family play in this new chapter of my life? I opted for a path of gradual forgiveness, not to erase the past, but not to let it define my future. I maintained my independence, my career, and my projects, but I made room for the possibility of a slow and genuine reconciliation. Daniel's companionship began to be reborn, albeit marked by the scars of the past. My parents demonstrated sincere remorse, seeking ways to reconnect. And Oliver was the personification of hope, a constant reminder of the importance of family ties and the ability to start over. Through him, I learned that forgiveness is not a favor one does for another, but a liberation for oneself. Leona's story didn't have a fairy tale ending, with all problems magically solved, but it was an ending of overcoming, of reconstruction, and of openness to a future where the past was acknowledged but did not imprison. Leona continued her journey, strong and independent, with the possibility of having her family back in her life on her own terms, learning that family ties can be complex and painful, but they can also transform and strengthen with time and forgiveness. What did you think of Leona's story? Would you have forgiven and moved on like her, or would you have cut ties and continued life without speaking to those who didn't defend you? Tell us in the comments below. If you liked this story, please like and share this video and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.